Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
It's our history unit for the month of January. We're talking about things that happened in the past and how they affect the present. And you know, some of you, of course, maybe about 5, 10, 20 years ago, whatever the case may be, started to learn English, and then you came to the unit where you had to learn the names of the days of the week and the months of the year, and you were scratching your head. What? These words? These are strange words. Why would they call their months this stuff? We just say 1月、2月、3月 some of the, but not in English. Yeah, they don't make any sense, and you have to memorize them one by one.
These month names are really strange. I don't think about it anymore because I grew up with them. But I guess if you were learning this language for the first time, you'd think, what kind of words are those? Especially that February is really kind of a strange spelling. February is hard to say. Most of us just say February, and we forget the R. So
I think when I was a kid, I said February instead of saying February.
February.
But yeah, that's the second month of the year, February. But yeah, we're talking about the months of the year and where those names came from. So let's get to it, everybody. Let's read today's article one time. When it comes to month names, Chinese keeps it simple. But the same can't be said about English, with month names like January and April seeming totally unrelated to their order on the calendar. Where do these weird words come from? To find out, we must look back in time to ancient Rome. Unlike today's solar-based Gregorian calendar, the Romans used a complicated lunar calendar. Since the government and military were inactive during the dead winter months, the Romans did not name or divide this time. They only named months between what we call March and December. March, the first month of the Roman year, was named for the war god Mars as the military returned to combat in spring. April, May, and June's names have noticeably more peaceful roots. April likely comes from the Latin verb aperire, to open, and marks the beginning of new life. May and June were named for the goddesses Maya and Juno, who represented growth and marriage. The last 4 months of the year were straightforwardly named to include the Latin numbers 7 to 10, septem, octo, novum, and decem. But what about January, February, July, and August? According to legend, King Numa Pompilius reformed the Roman calendar around 713 BC and introduced January as its first month, naming it after Janus, the god of beginnings and transitions. He also added February for the religious celebration Februa. Originally called Quintilis, or fifth month, July was renamed for Julius Caesar after his death. The sixth month, Sextilis, was likewise renamed August for the first Roman Emperor Augustus. Though other emperors also tried to name months in honor of themselves, these changes didn't endure. The Western calendar has seen numerous reforms and changes since the days of Rome. Nevertheless, this ancient empire's influence still shows in the language we use today.
Let's take a look at this, guys. Gods, emperors, and armies. We're getting the names of the English months all from these sources, from gods, from emperors, and from armies. So we're going to take a look back into history, back over time. So when it comes to month names, Chinese keeps it simple. It's so true. But the same can't be said about English. So if you say this phrase, the same can't be said about something, it means it's the opposite or it's just not true about something you stated earlier. Because we've got month names that are weird. January and April, seeming totally unrelated to their order on the calendar. Yeah, January does not mean 1 or first, no, and April doesn't mean 4 or fourth. So it has nothing to do with their order on the calendar, where they come based on the calendar that you see. So where do these weird words come from? We're going to find out. But in order to do that, we're going to have to take a look back in time to ancient Rome. Ancient Rome means really long ago. And during this time in ancient Rome, there aren't many records remaining. So it's kind of fun to look back into history when we're kind of, the records were quite scarce. There aren't a lot of them. So it's fun to look and see what we have in terms of history.
But we do have some information which can tell us why the months are called what they are. So here in the next paragraph it says, unlike today's solar-based Gregorian calendar, the Romans used a complicated lunar calendar, which is what is used here in Taiwan sometimes, not all the time, but it's mostly used by farmers and by the government to figure out when certain holidays happen, like Chinese New Year and Mid-Autumn Festival and stuff like that. Then you use the lunar calendar. Lunar means having to do with the moon, okay? So, yeah, sometimes we get to see a lunar eclipse when the Earth blocks out the sunlight hitting the moon, so the moon kind of turns a deep red color. That's a lunar eclipse. But in this particular case, the Romans did use a calendar that was based on the moon and not the sun. And if something has to do with the sun, then it's a solar, or we use the word solar for that. Like last year, I think there was a solar eclipse here in Taiwan. You could see the best part of that solar eclipse. You could see that down in Jiayi. That would be a solar eclipse. But in this particular case, today we use the solar-based calendar, which is also called the Gregorian calendar. So I believe that refers to one of the popes named Gregory. I believe it was Gregory the 13th. So we say Gregorian calendar when we refer to that pope here. At least that's when the calendar came out. And so that's the calendar we use nowadays. And it's solar-based. It's based on the days of the year according to the time it takes the Earth to go one time around the sun.
Yeah, but nowadays we are going to be talking about how a lot of these names came from the Roman calendar, right? That complicated lunar calendar. Since the government and military were inactive during the dead winter months, that would be nice, huh? During winter, nobody would do much of anything. The Romans did not name or divide this time, which is kind of weird. They just let the time go by. I wonder how they kept track of the days. But, they decided, let's just not even give that time a name or even divide it up. We're busy eating and drinking and sleeping. The only named months between what we call today March and December. So March through December all had real names. The rest of the time, no names.
Exactly. Okay. So again, they used this lunar calendar back then, and they were not active during the winter months. So, yes, they only named months between what we call March and December. So, March, the first month of the Roman year, was named for the war god Mars. Okay, I guess that makes sense. I didn't remember the name of the month March that way. Now that I know it's named after Mars, I might actually forget what to call the third month of the year. But to me, March means 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. I would think that March is like spring is coming, so everybody's kind of waking up from the dead winter, and they're starting to march forward toward the summer. I think that's how I probably memorized the name of the month March there. And, of course, that's the first month of the Roman year, and the Romans liked their gods, and they liked Mars. So, yes, indeed, they named the first month of the year Mars, or March, basically, which nowadays is the third month of the year, but you have to remember that the end of February used to be considered the end of the year. That's why we add a day to the end of February every 4 years, because that's where the year used to end, which to me makes more sense than ending it at the end of December. Who wants to end a year in the middle of the winter? That's dumb.
What's interesting is this sentence here. It says that March, that's when the military returned to combat in spring. Now, typically when you have a to followed by a word that can be a verb, You expect that word combat to be a verb, but it's not, guys. It's a noun. And this word combat is pronounced differently based on whether it's a noun or a verb. If it's a noun, like it is here, we say combat. But it's a verb. If it's a verb, we say combat, which really changes the sound a lot. So this is kind of tricky. Even though it looks like it's an infinitive, it's not. They're going to do something. Where are they going? They're going to combat. So they have to return to where the army is, where they train and where they sleep. That's what they're calling combat. And they only did that in spring. They got the whole winter off. Kind of nice. That would be a good time to attack these people, though. If your army's asleep and taking it easy in the winter, yeah, I'd attack them then. So they must have had a nice agreement between all of the countries going, yeah, let's just rest for a couple months during the winter.
Yeah, who wants to fight during the winter, though? They did not have down jackets and stuff like that, or thermal socks. They had to wear their togas and their sandals and stuff like that.
Kind of cold.
They stayed inside during the winter. We'll do that when the weather warms up in the spring. Now, here are some other months here. We got April, May, and June's names. They have noticeably more peaceful roots, and I believe we'll talk about these in just a couple of seconds. Let's take a break now. Take a little bit of a breather and let our Chinese teacher take over for a few minutes.
听众朋友大家好，我是安娜。我们今天呢要来谈谈英文12个月份名称的由来。好，我们先看一下 A 选项。虽然上面的其他的皇帝有试着想要命名用他们自己的名字，但是这些改变呢并没有持续 endure， 所以关键字在Other emperors， 如果提到其他的皇帝，就表示前文应该有提到一些皇帝哦，而且这些的改变就是前文的皇帝有用自己的名字去命名哦，它应该不会出现在最前面的地方。那么 B 选项，他们通常都只命名3到12月，那个 they 到底指的是什么呢？前文一定有提及。C 的选项 to find out， 为了要找出什么东西啊？为了要找出，我们就要往回看到远古罗马的时候哦。找出什么东西呢？前文一定会有提到要找什么东西。好，第一选项，这个古罗马王国的影响仍然还是在我们今天使用的语言当中会发现哦。所以猪的感觉啊，这个 D 的选项感觉有点像在结尾了，感觉好像是事情都讲得很清楚了虽然如何，但是今天的语言还是有被影响。好，那我们稍微看一下选项之后就回来看文章咯。因为提到月份的名字，中文就很简单，一定是1到12嘛，但是英文不是这样。那么英文这个月份呢，比如说1月跟4月就跟它的顺序 order 完全的 unrelated， 没有关联。那么到底这些 weird words 是从哪里来的呢？发现了一个问句，是不是要找答案？所以第一段最后面第一格 C to find out， 为了要找出答案，我们要回到古罗马的时候哦。那接下来我们看到第二段的第一句第一个字就是一个常常会混淆的单字，unlikely 是介系词，那么 like 这个字本身可以当介系词的像，或者是动词的喜欢，不过动词不喜欢叫做 dislike， 所以现在看到的 unlike 介系词叫做不像。什么东西不像呢？逗点之后的主词罗马人不像，所以是不像今天的阳历 solar based， 所谓 solar 就是太阳嘛，不像今天的阳历，罗马人用的是什么历呢？是一个 lunar calendar， 用的是一种阴历或者是所谓的农历。那么接下来这里的 since 有可能是自从或者是表原因的 because， 就要直接从上下文来开始看咯。后面提到的是政府啦或者是军方啊，在死气沉沉的冬季并不是很活跃，所以当时罗马人并没有命名或者是划分这种冬季的时候。那接着就是我们第二个啊，既然没有划分这个时期，那么言下之意就只有划分从3月到12月，所以文意顺着下来，第二个当然应该选 B 咯。 好，所以我们接着看一下3月的 March。3月呢是以战神 Mars 来命名。那么这句话当中的 as 呢，表示的是原因。为什么要用 Mars 这个名字呢？因为军队春天就会重返战场。而4月、5月、6月啊，就比较明显，比较 peaceful， 它的起源 roots 就比较平和。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Okay, welcome back. Let's continue. And where we left off, we were talking about the names of the month. We talked about the first month of the year, at least in old days, it was the first month of the year, March, which was named after Mars, the god of war. Well, now we're up to April, and we can also talk about May and June. But, of course, the origins of these months, the names of these months are more peaceful. They're not so warlike like March there.
Yeah.
April likely comes from the Latin verb apparire. I hope I said that right because I never studied Latin before. Although I studied Spanish before, that's kind of close. Spanish has a lot of Latin-based words. But,
I think you're right. I think it's apparire.
Okay,
Yeah.
you probably know more about that than I do. But that does look like the Spanish word for open, abrir.
Oh, yeah.
Abrir y cerrar. But in this particular case, apparire in Latin means to open, and that marks the beginning of new life. So yeah, April, that's when spring comes. That's when things open up and plants start growing. The birds start singing. You can see little buds on the branches of leaves. You can see the buds of leaves growing on twigs in the trees there. So yes, you've got lots of signs of spring. Hey, things are starting to open up.
And we've got May and June. How did we get their names? Well, these months were named for the goddesses Maya and Juno. I have heard of Juno. Actually, Juno was a good movie that was made about 10 years ago. Maya, I don't know so much, but you will actually hear that name today. Some of the girls are picking fun names like Maya, Juno, which is different. They were named for goddesses. So back then they had these gods and goddesses. They had stories about how, some of these gods and goddesses had magical powers. And we know a little bit more now because of science. But back then, the Romans and the Greeks would look to these gods and goddesses as if they were controlling the earth. For example, the sun and the wind and the storms were supposedly coming from these gods and goddesses based on their powers. So May and June were named for Maya and Juno, and they represented growth. That's probably Maya, and marriage, Juno, which makes sense because in the movie Juno, the little girl, she gets pregnant, and it's all about, that baby, and does she get married and stuff. So that's kind of fun. Growth and marriage.
Yeah, I guess a lot of people get married in June there. It's a nice,
yeah.
Cool time of the year to get married. It's summer.
Pretty.
Who wants to get married in December? That's a dumb idea. And for now, we're going to skip July and August, but we'll come back to them in just a second. But the last 4 months of the year were straightforwardly named to include the Latin numbers 7 to 10. Okay, so septem is Latin for 7, octo, novem, December, 8, 9, and 10, respectively there. So, yeah, September, October, November, and December. Kind of weird that December, it means 10, but actually it's the 12th month of the year. So that's really weird, but I guess we're used to it.
Yeah, it doesn't make as much sense as Chinese, so sorry. But what about January, February, July, and August? Well, according to legend, this king Numa Pompilius reformed the Roman calendar around 713 BC. And that's when January was introduced as its first month. Naming it after Janus. Janus was the god of beginnings and transitions, which makes sense because, January was the beginning of a new year. Now, according to legend, you'll often see this as a phrase used in English writing. You can say according to the legend, that's okay, but we typically will say according to legend as an intro to talk about what that story that was passed down through time was all about. So a legend doesn't necessarily have to be based in fact or based on fact. It can be a story that's just really popular and it's been told from generation to generation, and you can't really prove anything in it, but it still remains a legend because it's fun and it's part of our tradition or culture.
Yeah, maybe you've heard of the legend of Paul Bunyan, for example, a great lumberjack who lived in Minnesota many years ago. But in any case here, according to legend, according to an old story, this king reformed the Roman calendar in 713 BC. That's a long time ago. And this person introduced January as its first month, naming it after Janus. Some people say Janus, and that is the god of beginnings and transitions, which makes sense. Beginnings, things start. So yeah, January, the first month when things start, makes sense. And also transitions, which means changing from one thing to another, a transition. So yeah, we're changing from one year to the next year. We are transitioning from one year to the next.
You can use this word as a noun or as a verb. So if it's a verb, you're going to undergo a change, undergo a process, or a period where things just change a lot. And if it's a noun, it's just that process or a period of changing. So you could say students are in transition from one program to another as they change grades. We're going to transition our company from a technology company to a service company. So you can use it both ways. Here, we're talking about transitions as a noun. Transitions. It is countable, by the way. He also added February for the religious celebration Februa. I think that's how you said it, Tom. Februa. Originally, this was called Quintilis, or fifth month. And July was named for Julius Caesar after his death. Remember, Julius Caesar was killed by a friend, Brutus, who stabbed him to death.
Ooh.
A2 Brutus. A2 means, and you? In Latin. So kind of a fun piece of history there. Julius Caesar was a real historic figure. And if you don't know much about him, there are plenty of movies and TV shows about this character.
Right, so that's where the word July comes from. It was named after Julius Caesar after he died. And then the 6-month Sextilis was likewise named or renamed August for the first Roman emperor Augustus. So I think I kind of knew that August is from the first Roman emperor Augustus. And though other emperors also tried to name months in honor of themselves, these changes didn't endure. The names just didn't stick. People just did not accept the new names. And there you have it. That's where the names of the months all come from.
So interesting. Yeah, very, very interesting. A lot about history for sure. Augustus was actually related to Julius Caesar. If you look at him up, he was his great uncle, Julius Caesar, came before him. So, yeah, it's kind of fun to look at some of where these names come from. Though other emperors also tried to name months in honor of themselves, these changes didn't endure. Sometimes people were like, yeah, no. But an emperor has a lot of power, much more power than just, say, a prime minister or president. An emperor is the ruler of a lot of different areas, and they rule an empire. So these emperors had a lot of power, and I can see why they'd want their name to go down in history, and people always remember their name. But sometimes they just didn't stick. Sometimes we use that phrase, yeah, it just didn't stick. It wasn't catchy enough. People didn't really buy into it. So over time, those changes they tried to install just went away.
Indeed, but the Western calendar has been around for a long time, but it has seen numerous reforms and changes since the days of Rome. So yeah, they've tried to make some changes here and there, but nevertheless, this ancient empire's influence still shows in the language we use today. So there you have it. There's where all the names of the months come from. These various references to Roman emperors and numbers and stuff like that. And I highly doubt it's ever going to change within our lifetimes, although it would be nice to make it as simple as the Chinese calendar.
Yeah.
1月、2月、3月、4月 That is just so much easier.
It sure is. We're going to listen one more time to our Chinese teacher, guys, and then we'll be back to say goodbye.
那么4月呢，基本上它比较是从拉丁文当中的有一个就是开启的这个意思而来。那当然就是新生活的开启，因为我们知道4月大概就春天开始咯。5月的 May 还有6月的 June 通常都是象征成长啦，或者是婚姻啦，因为春天开启嘛，接下来就成长。所以会以女神 Maya 还有 Juno 的名字来命名，而一年当中最后4个月呢，就直接 straightforwardly 就被命名拉丁数字7到12。那么因为我们记得冬天那个1月2月那一段时间是没有被区分的，所以后面呢9、10、11、12月其实是拉丁数字7到10。好，我们看一下倒数第2段。但是1月、2月啊、7月、8月呢，到底是怎么出生？怎么是这样子命名出来的呢？因为根据传说啊，有一个国王，他差不多在西元前713年的时候有改革 reform 罗马历，所以当时他就把1月当成第一个月 ，introduce A as B， 把 A当为 B， 并且呢，它基本上是以一个神的名字来命名的，也就是 Janus。这个 Janus 的神呢，它是象征着 beginnings, transformations， 开端啊，转变。那么也为了要庆祝一些宗教活动呢，就增加了 February， 就增加了2月，还有5月啊、7月，后来都重新命名。不过后来呢，就有皇帝以 August 以自己的名字来改成8月，叫做 August。所以开始有以自己皇帝的名字来命名月份的这种习俗。好，接下来第3格我们看一下，答案是虽然其他的皇帝也试着这么做，但是这些改名啊其实没有持续，因为大家可能都已经很习惯每个月份大概要怎么说了，所以到最后西洋的历法呢其实是经过了很多的改革变化，但是最后的结尾答案选 D， 这些影响还是在我们今日使用的英文当中有很大的影响。我是安娜，我们下次见咯，拜拜。
That is it for today. Remember, everybody, this is the month of January, named after Janus. And next month, of course, is February, named after some kind of ancient festival. But, it's 2月份. Who cares? We'll just call it that here in Taiwan. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.